Hey, it's Jay here, and welcome to the Alderton Podcast. Now, if you're listening to this thinking, hang on, wasn't this the Mindset with Muscle podcast? You'd be absolutely right. But much like Madonna, as I get older, I like to reinvent myself. And in the spirit of making it easier for you to find me, I've given the podcast a little facelift. So, what's new? Well, I'll be dropping regular episodes packed with strategies to help those of you over 40 realize that your best years aren't behind you, they're just getting started. And what better way to kick off 2025 than with an absolute banger of an episode? Joining me today is a great friend of mine and returning guest, Sahil Bloom. This is his third time on the show, and for a good reason. Sahil is an exceptional entrepreneur and creator whose superpower is asking the right questions and sharing the answers that can truly change your life. With over 1 million followers on X, 750,000 followers on Instagram, and an impressive 800,000 readers of his newsletter, it's safe to say Sahil is the real deal when it comes to personal growth, wealth, and success. In this episode, we're diving into his long-awaited book, The 5 Types of Wealth. I've read this book twice, and let me tell you, it's a game changer. If you want to grab a copy, just hit the link in the show notes below. So without further ado, let's kick off this brand new era of the podcast with a conversation you don't want to miss. My interview with the legend that is Sahil Bloom. Sahil, welcome to the Mindset with Muscle podcast for the third time in the last 3 years. And I think you are officially the guest who has been on the most times of my podcast.
Well, I'm honored, and we were talking about this off camera before, but there's a certain camaraderie and alignment that I think you feel immediately with someone. And I remember the first time we got together, and we hadn't even spent time together before starting the recording, and it was like this immediate click of, I feel like I understand this person. And there's so much. I mean, it's in both of our works and the things that we put out into the world, but there's so much to be said for like the outward display of the values that you hold close and how those attract the right type of people into your world. And I feel like I had been seeing and admiring your content, the things you were putting out into the world for a long time. And so it was just obvious to me that you and I would have that level of connection and camaraderie. And so I'm glad to get to do it again.
And I just want to say thank you for sending me an early copy of your book. I mean, it resonated so much with me with everything. You know, when you're reading chapters and you're nodding and you feel like you've experienced those things yourself. And for me, a lot of it is just trying to understand wants, needs, desires, and fears. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've kind of taken away from, you know, I think yourself and me, we're very much, what gets measured gets improved, and this need for understanding and the curiosity that leads to that. And I think that has resonated with me, with you from day one. It's just being massively curious and understanding that the best way of understanding anything in the world is to also teach others what it is that you've learned. And it's been a passion of mine for the last 14 years since I've been on social media. I get excited about things, and the minute that I get excited about something that's had an impact in my life, I've wanted to share it to other people in the hope that they have the same feeling as me. And I resonate so much with your work with that too, that you've had things which have really shook you to your core, understanding and this need and want to kind of teach other people that same thing. So I think that's why. Yeah. Definitely resonates so much with you.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, you are a personification of some of the ideas and the core idea of this book and of redefining wealth. And you know, I think what you said is true. I just center on gratitude, and what I mean by that is I just feel so grateful for where I am in life and for the journey that these ideas have taken me on over the last really just 3 years, because it's so easy for me to feel, you know, if you had a massive shift in your life 20 years ago, it's not, you don't feel it quite as viscerally. It's not quite there anymore in the same way. But I know what my life looked like 3.5, 4 years ago. And I know what my life feels like today. And this book is a manifestation of that journey. And it's not about me, but the ideas that are put into it and the heart that is put into it is that journey. And I felt the impact that it had on my life. And so it was screaming at me, as you said, to share that with the world and to hopefully create that value or be that spark, that catalyst that someone else can go and run with in theirs.
So that's why I really want to start our conversation today, Sahil. And it was May 2021, sitting down for a beer with your friend, not knowing that that conversation was going to have such an impact on your life. If you could kind of rewind back to that time and let us know exactly what happened when you were having that beer with him.
Mm-hmm. We're going to get right into it. It's helpful to understand the context on that conversation too, which is where I was at in my life at the time. I had spent really the first 30 years of my life chasing external solutions to an internal problem. And that internal problem was that I never felt like I was enough. I was insecure. I hid a lot of things from the world about who I was. And when you do that, you chase all sorts of external affirmation. You want other people to tell you that you're great because you feel like if enough people do that, someday you will wake up and feel great internally. And as we learn at one point or another, that is not the case. You cannot fix an internal problem with an external solution. And unfortunately, that chase for whatever more was out there was leading to a breakdown of a lot of areas that were really important in my life. I was making more and more money. So on the surface, things looked good. My early years of my career were like this steady upward climb. But while that was happening, my health was really suffering. I was drinking 6-7 nights a week. My mental health was in a bad place. Most importantly, my relationships were really struggling. I wasn't seeing my parents. We lived 3,000 miles away. My sister and I had a basically non-existent relationship at the time. And my wife and I, who had grown up together and had the most incredible relationship, were experiencing challenges as we tried to conceive. And that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. It tends to be stigmatized. It's a burden that my wife carried and that I wasn't at the time present to help her carry and to shoulder my piece of. And so my life was in this very weird state in May 2021, where on the outside looking in, you would have said, I was winning the game. Things are good. He's making money, because that's how we measure success. But internally, everything was really cracking. And so I went out for this drink with an old friend that I hadn't seen in a while. And we sat down and he asked, how are you doing? And, I said, I'm good, busy. It's like the standard response we all say, right? Like it's sort of like the weird pseudo dystopian status flex. Like if you're not busy, you're clearly lazy or whatever it might be. So I say that and he kind of looked at me because he knows me better than that. And I opened up and I said that it had started to get hard being so far away from my parents, who I grew up very close to and who were getting older, living so far away. And he looked at me and he said, how old are they? And I said, mid-60s. And he said, how often do you see them? I said, maybe once a year. And he just looked at me and said, okay, so you're going to see them 15 more times before they die. And I remember feeling like I had just gotten punched in the gut. I mean, the idea that the amount of time you have left with the people that you care about most is so finite and so countable that you can put it onto a few hands is just terrifying. And so that night I went home, having had several more drinks, passed out, woke up the next morning, and I told my wife that I thought we needed to make a change. That math had broken me. It had shaken me to my core. And within 45 days, we had left California. I had left my job and we had moved our life back to the East Coast to be closer to our families. And the most beautiful thing in all of it, which I've never shared publicly, is within 2 weeks of getting back to the East Coast, after a year and a half of being unable to conceive, my wife got pregnant. And it was one of those moments in life where you feel like God winked at you. I'm not a particularly religious person, but sometimes when your energy comes into alignment in life, everything falls into place as it should. And that was one of those moments in my life. And that was the start of the journey that's led to this whole idea.
And what I love about that, and it's a very similar thing to myself, Sahil, where I was going through a difficult time where I split up from business partners and I started again, and we were kind of juggling whilst splitting up from the business that my wife was pregnant. And, you know, it was a stressful time, but it all worked out well. And whenever I'm having business problems, I always look at my son, because he's 5 years of age. And whenever I think about that, I look at my business as my son. So I'm like, you know, he's not even developed into, you know, a teenager yet. So when I look at my business like that, I feel a lot more relaxed about it because I'm still figuring things out. And I suppose when you're looking at Roman, you can say, look, you know, me on this new journey of understanding is the same age as Roman. And as you kind of grow and develop, I always find it looking at Archer like that, as in to say, I've got this kind of feedback there that says, look, you know, it's fine. Be patient. It's, you know, this thing that you're on is only 5 years of age now. And I think that's been a really good thing for myself.
There's so much to learn from young kids too. Yeah. I mean, like, lean into your energy. You see kids, right? Like, they're just constantly pursuing their energy. What's getting them excited? And it could be something stupid, right? Like they want to run and crash into you, but they're going to go at it all full tilt, right? Like my son is in the age right now where he's prime roughhousing age. He just wants to like roughhouse with me in the evening. And it's making his mom go nuts because he doesn't want to go to sleep at his normal time because he sees me, I get done with work, and he just wants to like wrestle, run at me, tackle, whatever, all of that stuff. But they pursue things with such full, open-eyed wonder, whatever it is. And so like to the business analogy, how can you do that? How can you adopt that exact same idea when you're looking at your businesses, when you're looking at business opportunities, whatever it might be? What are those things that are pulling your energy? Just go all in on those things. A lot of good comes from it.
Yeah, absolutely love it. So with your book, Sahil, the main word around everything is wealth. And it led me to kind of trying to understand what the dictionary defines as wealth. And there's two things that came up, and it said an abundance of valuable possessions or money and a plentiful supply of a particular desirable thing. Where do you think people go wrong when it comes to wealth? Because from those two kind of understandings, it seems that we're on this quest to accumulate an abundance of valuable possessions or money, and that we're looking to create a plentiful supply of things that others deem valuable, and not necessarily understanding really what we should be looking at as valuable in our lives.
We're measuring the wrong thing, put simply, and that's money. And it's actually not altogether surprising that we do that, because it is the most easily measured form of wealth. And it is the thing that we can easily put a single number to and say, okay, that's what I'm worth, that number, whatever it might be. And it's easy. You can see it across different people, and you can measure yourself from a status and hierarchy standpoint. And so we focus on it. And there's a famous quote, Peter Drucker, the management theorist, said, "What gets measured gets managed." And this is this idea that the thing that you can easily measure ends up being the thing that you optimize around. It's the thing that you focus on narrowly. And that's what's happened to all of us when it comes to wealth. We live in a world where wealth equals money. And that is the default definition of your worth and of your success as a human being, is a single number that you can put next to your name for how much money you've earned. And unfortunately, it's actually quite disjointed from the things that contribute to a meaningful, fulfilling life. How many rich, miserable people do you know? How many billionaires have ended up in jail or committed suicide or have broken relationships with their children or divorces? Go look at the Forbes top 10 richest people in the world. They have 13 divorces among them. How many of them have broken relationships with their children? I don't know. But the point is, money does not equal the end that we're all looking for. It's a battle, but not the war. And so I talk about this concept in the book of the Pyrrhic victory, this idea of a victory that comes at such a steep cost to the victor that it might as well have been a defeat. It's the idea that you can win the battle, but lose the war. And we are so often, and so many of us are marching down that path. We're going to win the battle, make a bunch of money, but lose the war, which is about relationships. It's about time. It's about love. It's about your health, mental and physical. It's about all of these other things. And that, uncovering that, and then figuring out how can we more broadly define what a wealthy life looks like? How can we just change the definition in common parlance? That is the mission of all of this. And that's the journey that I find myself on.
Reminds me of a quote by Jim Carrey, and I'm paraphrasing this. And he said, "I wish everyone could have an immense amount of success and money, so they can finally realize that that's not it." And it makes me ponder a lot, like you said, about the Pyrrhic victory, that people pursue something at a cost or a sacrifice, and it's only when they actually achieve that thing that they realize the cost or sacrifice of it. Do you think that people need to go down that route in order to truly understand that that's not it? And I think, referring back to Jim Carrey's quote, but also knowing that, we learn from our mistakes, and as much as we say that to increase your learning speed to learn from the mistakes of others, do you think it hits home enough from people to not make those mistakes themselves?
We learn from history in every area of our lives, right? Like we go back to the example of children. When you're learning to walk and you start trying to walk and you fall flat on your face, you learn very quickly, like, okay, that's not the way I should walk. As you get older, that's through experience, right? That's like the experiencing the bad thing. As you get older, you read things that you learn from. You read things that other people have experienced that you learn from so that you don't go do that. You read that it's a bad idea to put your finger into an electrical socket. You don't need to put your finger into an electrical socket to learn that lesson. We learn things from seeing them through others. So I think we should be able to do that. Learn from what we know historically and in the present day that it's not it. The problem is that a lot of those things are invisible. So you go read a biography of some ultra successful businessman from history who made bundles and bundles of money. You see the list price for their success, meaning the biography talks all about the hard work, the years of effort, the sacrifices that they made, from a financial standpoint, the leverage they took on, all of these things of how they built their business empire. It doesn't talk about the real price of that success. It doesn't talk about the relationships they lost along the way. It doesn't talk about their integrity or morals that might have suffered. It doesn't talk about their health and how it suffered as a result of that focus. It doesn't talk about the fact that their children didn't want to know them when they were adults. It doesn't talk about that broader set of sacrifices. If it did, if it shined more of a light on those things, if we didn't glamorize the financial success as much as we do historically, I think people would have a better feeling of that fact ingrained in their minds. But we don't see it, right? Like when you look at the business legends of today, all you see is these people getting celebrated for the dollar figure. You don't think about the fact that they have a lot of broken relationships along the way, that they're overweight, super unhealthy. You don't think about those things. And so we have a lot of work to do to shine a light on those invisible problems. But once we do, people will see that. So you don't have to experience the rock bottom moment. You don't have to experience the terrible trouble. The other thing that's important to say is 5 types of wealth. One of them is financial wealth. Nothing in this book is to say that money doesn't matter, that you should, give up all your worldly possessions and go off to the Himalayas and become a monk and drink warm broth for 12 hours a day and meditate with all your time. If you want to do that, then by all means you should. I just won't be joining you. Money isn't nothing. It just can't be the only thing. And the important thing with all of this is something that you know in the back of your mind, right? Like you know that there's more to your ultimate fulfillment, happiness, and joy than money. But your actions don't bear out that knowledge. every single day, you might know that when you're 80, what you're really going to care about is the people that are next to you. It's your relationship with your children. It's your physical and mental health. It's those for the free time, the freedom of the mind, etc. But your actions in the present are what is going to create or break that future from happening. And your actions in the present are simply chasing one thing, which is financial success. And so if you don't change your actions in the present, you're not going to get to that desired future end. And that is what this book is really calling you to do. It's to ask the questions to figure out what matters to you, and then to start taking the tiny actions today to go and create that desired future.
I wanted to share with you a poem by Kurt Vonnegut, and he put this as a poem in the New Yorker in 2005 in May. I don't know if you've heard it before. It's a true story apparently, and he says, Joseph Heller, an important and funny writer, now dead, and I were at a party given by a billionaire on Shelter Island. I said, Joe, how does it make you feel to know that our host only yesterday may have made more money than your novel Catch-22 has earned in its entire history? And Joe said, I've got something he can never have. And I said, what on earth could that be, Joe? And Joe said, the knowledge that I've got enough. And that really resonated instantly when I'd read your book and remembered that quote of actually having a definition in yourself of what is enough, because it's going to be different from every single person. And it leads me on to what you were saying in the book. I wasn't playing the wrong game. I was playing the game wrong. The scoreboard was the problem. Our scoreboard is broken. It forces us into a narrow measurement of wealth, success, happiness, and fulfillment entirely defined by money. How do we start to really understand through different types of measurement what is enough in our own lives?
The biggest thing to me is making enough a conscious vision rather than something in the back of our minds. Humans have a biological tendency to reset to a new baseline. So it's called the hedonic treadmill, hedonic adaptation. It's the idea that you get some new good thing. Now, all of a sudden, that becomes your baseline. And so anything that dips below that feels really bad. Anything that dips above that, you just sort of continue to reset to these higher and higher levels. It's lifestyle creep, right? You make more money, and now that becomes your baseline. The problem with that is that you get into this cycle of the never enough. You get into this cycle of feeling like, okay, I'm going to be perfectly content and happy when I reach that summit that I'm gunning for right now. You get that summit, you feel this momentary high, and then immediately start feeling that dread of what's next. What's the next higher height? What did I not accomplish? What did I not achieve? Making that happen much more rationally and consciously versus subconsciously is the key. You're never going to completely shut it off. That is human nature. It's biology. But you can force it to be a conscious shift, one that you're aware of. And I go through this exercise in the book of vividly defining and imagining what your enough life looks like. And it doesn't have to be Spartan. There's this tendency when someone says money doesn't buy you happiness to think that means that you need to hate money and give up money. I don't hate money. I rather like having nice things. I would like to have a second home that I could entertain and bring people together in. There's plenty of things that can be part of your enough life that aren't, that are beyond basic human necessities. They can be luxuries, and that's fine. The point is that it has to be clearly defined so that when you're getting close to it or when you're feeling it, and you're feeling, oh, I do have enough in this moment. I feel like I've arrived and I don't need to go anywhere. There's this concept of the arrival fallacy, which is this idea that humans think that we're going to feel like we've arrived when we reach whatever we've set up as our destination, whatever goal, bonus, income level, whatever the thing is. And inevitably you get there and you just reset to whatever the next summit is off in the distance. And in the prologue of the book, I tell this story that that was my life. I was feeling that every single year. I told myself, I convinced myself that my happiness, fulfillment, and joy, that idyllic land of success that I was one day going to feel, where I felt internally good about myself, was just on the other side of that next bonus or that next promotion or that next title or whatever, the next bottle of wine, whatever the thing was. And inevitably, I'd get there and it wasn't. And I had this experience after my son was born. I was walking him around the neighborhood early one morning, and this old man came up to me on the sidewalk, and he said, I remember standing here with my newborn daughter. Well, she's 45 years old now. And he said, it goes by fast. Cherish it. And I brought my son home, and it hit me so hard. I brought him into bed. My wife was asleep, and the sun was kind of coming through the window a little bit. And he had this like perfectly content smile on his face. And I was just looking at this scene. Like I'm in my house. My wife is asleep. My son is here. He's healthy. We'd struggled so long to have him. And I just had this sensation that for the first time in my life, I had arrived, but I didn't want anything else. That moment was enough. And the recognition I had in that moment was this idea that you can never let the quest for more distract you from the beauty of enough. And that idea of the beauty of enough is so central to what we're talking about with all of this. It's figuring out what that is, embracing that beauty of enough. And again, it doesn't need to be Spartan. It can be a magnificent, beautiful, incredible life, but you need to know what it is.
I love that, Sahil. And of course, your new scoreboard is your 5 types of wealth. And I want to kind of deep dive into each one, which of course is time wealth, social wealth, mental wealth, physical wealth, and financial wealth. And it kind of resonated. I don't know if you've heard of the 4 burners theory before. And of course, for those of you who don't know, it's a concept where it's trying to teach people to balance their priorities. And if you can envision a gas burner with 4 burners: family, friends, work, and health. And the theory suggests that to be successful, you can only have 3 burners on at once. And to be very successful, you can only have 2. Do you think that theory's correct, Sahil? Do you believe that in order to have it all, that you need to reduce down or switch one of those burners off?
No. This is like my rejection of this common convention of these on-off switches in life. We're so often told versions of that. That if we want to build something beautiful in one area, everything else needs to be shut off. It's like this on-off switch, right? If you're going to turn on, if you're going to really focus on your career, then, too bad. We got to flip off family. We got to flip off friends. We got to flip off your health, your mental health, all these other areas, right? I lived that. I know what that looks like. It's not good. It's not productive. That is a default setting. That is a assumption that we're fed, that we're told, that we're indoctrinated into, that we need to reject. And what we need to pull and accept instead is our own way, which is that all of these areas of life can exist on what I call a dimmer switch. That, yes, you may have one of the areas turned on that you are really focused on during this season of your life, during this chapter, this period. But that doesn't mean that the other areas get turned off. It simply means that they're going to be turned down, but that you're going to focus on some highly leveraged action that will continue to move that thing forward. The concept being that anything above 0 compounds. And that's really important because in all of these areas of our life, if we don't invest in them, they will atrophy and fall apart. You cannot expect, if you do not invest in your physical health in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, you will not have it in your 50s, 60s, and 70s. If you don't invest in your mind in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, your mind will not be there for you in your later years of life. If you don't invest in your relationships with your partner, with your children, with your best friends, with your further out friends, they will not be there for you during the hard times that inevitably come later in life. And so we know you cannot think of these things as existing on an infinite time horizon because they don't. If you don't make the investments now, they will not be there later. The same way, if you don't put money away now, you won't have money later. It's the exact same principle, but for these other areas of our life. And so it's important to know that even while you're in the season of your life where you're hard charging, career ambitions, really pushing on things in your 20s and 30s, which is a great time to do that. It's really important to know that you can still pick a couple of high leverage actions that will keep these other things moving forward, that will maintain them or make slight forward progress with them so that they don't atrophy. And that's what the book contemplates. It's create your own adventure around these things. Everyone's seasons are going to look different. My seasons are not going to be the same as yours. If you have children in your 40s and you have young children in your 40s, it's going to look very different than the person who had them at 25. If you decide not to have children, it'll look very different than the person who did. If you're a retiree, it looks very different. All of these things, it's entirely individual. But the tools that you can use in any season are universal. Anyone can use them. And so identifying what those are, understanding that you need to reject that idea of the flip off, the different switches, and that all of these things can be continued to be invested in throughout the course of your life. And frankly, that is necessary in order to build this comprehensively wealthy life.
I think that's so important to understand that it's not a case, it's not binary, it's not on off. It is, sometimes you need to put your foot on the gas with some stuff, and sometimes you need to take your foot off. And I heard Mark Manson talk about this in his podcast about yes mode and no mode. And he used an analogy of going to a Brazilian steakhouse, and when they put the thing on the table, it's like, if it's green, keep coming in, keep going in. And when it's red, leave me alone. And, I'm going into a season next year of no mode, and it's no mode with certain requests for my time, because I really want to focus on other things that need more of my attention. So, very much like you said there, it's an assessment of where you need to focus more of your efforts and time in order for things to cherish and grow. And for myself, it's going into kind of a self-serving business mode, which isn't required for other people. So it's a no for 6 months of potential opportunities to collaborate with other people in order that I can build and grow this and understand this thing that I'm doing. But for the very point of them being able to say, it's not no, don't bother me, it's just no, not yet, and giving people more of a clear estimate of when I can turn that card over and say, yes, I'm ready for it. And I think that was something that I got wrong in the past, where, for myself back in 2016, I was like saying to my relationships, we've got to put this on hold for 8 months whilst I'm building this, business and this financial success. And then what happened is all of that came, and then I realized that there was something missing. And once again, you get that arrival fallacy. If you get there, you achieve it, you tick all the boxes, and yet you still feel empty. That emptiness comes from knowing deep down that, you've switched off that burner. And unfortunately, you're going to really struggle to put that back on.
It's hard to turn it back on.
Yeah. And, that completely changed my life. It was a realization that these aren't these burners that go off. It's a game you play where you just reduce them down and increase them, and you will continue to play that game and until the day that you die. But it's not the game of switching them off. And, I resonate so much with that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people get lost in this idea of balance. And the reason I think they get lost is because they think of balance on the micro scale, meaning every day should be balanced. I need my day to be perfectly balanced between work and health and social life and family and hobbies, and every single day should be balanced. And that in and of itself is a recipe for failure, because it's very hard for every single day to look balanced. What you want is, when you zoom out at the macro picture, for you to have balance. And when you look at a full year, you want to say, okay, that year was kind of balanced. Or when you look at a few years, it can be balanced. But you're going to have seasons of unbalance in order to achieve those seasons of balance, right? Like, I'm here right now. We're in London. I'm here for a full week. I don't love traveling away from my son and from my wife, right? Like, I have a 2.5-year-old. He knows when I leave now. He understands it. It makes him sad. We don't get to play. It makes me sad. But this is a season of unbalance to build something that I really care about, to make an impact that I really care about, that I explained to my son is important to me and is important to us and what we're trying to do in the world. And I know that that season of unbalance that I'm in is going to build seasons of balance, and that I'm going to need to find that season of balance after it. And so I also would encourage people, when you're thinking about your own life, to recognize that not every day is going to look balanced. And that's good. That's okay. That's totally fine. What you want to look for and try to build towards is that macro zoomed out view that looks like you have balance, that feels that in your life.
Well, we're going to start with time wealth, Sahil, and what you said in the book is the freedom to choose how to spend your time, whom to spend it with, where to spend it, and when to trade it for something else. Where do you think people go wrong with their time wealth?
The first place that people go wrong with time wealth is not appreciating time as your most valuable asset. Especially young people. Time is one of those things where if you were to map how much people think about it over the course of their lives, it's like this low line that slightly increases, but it's very low. And then right at the end, it's the only thing you care about. Literally the only thing you care about. You beg for more, you do anything for more. But your whole life, you didn't think about it, you didn't care about it. You thought you were immortal. And that is a devastating thing, because that means that during this entire window, when you weren't appreciating how finite, how impermanent, and how valuable it is, you were doing dumb things that were spitting on the value of your time. And you go to a young person, you say, would you trade lives with Warren Buffett? I ask you, would you trade lives with Warren Buffett? He's worth $130 billion. He has access to anyone in the world. He flies around on private jets. He's got plenty of amazing houses. He spends all day learning and reading. But I'm willing to bet you would not trade lives with him, because he's 95 years old. There's no way you would trade the amount of time you have left for the amount of time he does for any amount of money. And on the flip side, he would probably trade lives with you. He would give up all of the money that he has in the world to be your age again. And so we know that time is our most valuable asset, that it is literally incalculable value. But then on a daily basis, we do a bunch of dumb we sit around and spend 2 hours watching Netflix, or we sit around scrolling on TikTok, scrolling on our phones, doing whatever nonsense, spitting on the value of that time. And so the first thing with time wealth is just creating that awareness, slapping yourself a little bit and pulling yourself back into the present to say, like, I am a time billionaire. It's one of the concepts that comes out in the book. I literally have billions of seconds left in my life. If I'm 50 years old, I have about 1 billion seconds left. If I'm 20 years old, I have 2 billion seconds left. That is my most precious asset. That time can be turned into anything that I want in the entire world if I'm willing to put in effort to it. That recognition will change your life.
I don't know why this came up into my head when you were talking, but time is a bit like toothpaste. And what I mean by that is you put the most effort and energy into the toothpaste when you've got the least amount left. Because when you've got a full tub of toothpaste, you just put it out like that. And I just was thinking the amount of effort that I put into getting that last little bit out. And unfortunately, with toothpaste, you can always buy another tub. But with obviously time, you are literally squeezing that out till there's no more.
There's sort of this wisdom or insight from the other side that shines back onto your path. Like you experience a tragedy in your family. Someone passes away. Someone gets sick. Something really sad, really challenging happens in your life. And there's some blinding insight that comes from that. It's like when someone has a near-death experience and they experience this like new lease and fervor for life. And that light from this tragedy sort of shines back onto your path in the present. You see some older relative or some friend or someone gets sick or someone passes, and it changes you. You feel this light shine onto you. It's like, oh my God, they said at the end that this was the only thing that mattered to them, or they should have focused more on this or that. You read the 5 regrets of the dying. You learn these things and you hear those things, you nod your head, and then you go back living the exact same damn way you were before. And if there's one thing that will change your life, it is to just hear that wisdom, let that light shine on your path, and then just take one tiny action. do something just slightly differently than you were before. Live a slightly better way than you were, because that one ripple that you create, the momentum from that, can change your entire world. But if you keep going on and just living the same way you were before, the same patterns, the same mindsets, the same actions, it's rejecting that light from the other side. And to reject the light is to live in the dark. And why would you want to do that?
I think it's something that people need to be mindful of each and every day, and something that resonated with myself so much so that I've got it tattooed on my arm is the phrase memento mori. What does that mean to you? And of course, please let us know what it actually means.
Yeah. So memento mori was this Stoic practice of remembering your mortality. I think it actually translates to "remember thou art mortal." And the practice came from ancient Rome, where the conquering heroes would come back to these enormous military parades. They would be, on this golden chariot going through the streets, throngs of adoring fans, praising them, and they recognized that might create this feeling of immortality in that conquering hero. And so they would put someone right behind them in the chariot that would just whisper in their ear over and over again, memento mori, remember thou art mortal, remember that you must die. And that idea, while it sounds morbid, is actually intended to be an illuminating or inspiring one. It's the recognition that you will never be more present, beautiful, and alive than you are right now. That you need to embrace the present, that you can't live for tomorrow, that you can't live for some future, because that future is entirely uncertain. That future may never come for you. You could have it all ripped away from you today. So what are you doing to live in the present, in the now?
My kind of up-to-date version of this is that no one remembers the last time they logged out of MSN Messenger. And it sounds kind of humorous, but it's just this reality that you don't realize things are gone until they're gone. And a practice that I do probably daily now is, my son Archer's 5, he still comes into our bed, and as I get up, I just take that 1 minute to remember that, because it might be kind of that last time that he comes into our bed, and I'm then able to savor lots of, this might be the last day, so savor it. And it's been a great kind of mental model, for myself, and just really savoring that time, especially with things that aren't going to last forever.
Yeah, that that idea, I think I first heard that from Sam Harris, the philosopher. Talked about that idea that there's going to be a last time for everything, and it impacted me deeply. I mean, that idea that there's going to be a last time that your kid is going to want you to tuck them into bed at night. There's going to be a last time that your wife gives you a kiss before bed. There's going to be a last time that you go on a walk with your parents, that you go out for coffee with your sibling, that you get together with your best group of friends, is so scary and feels so surreal. But it is reality. It's the harsh reality of life. And it can be so powerful if you accept it, because it will make you take actions to appreciate, to have gratitude for those things every single day. I had a moment recently with my son. I was in my office working, and I was really focusing on something, and he came in and was like making a huge mess, just classic toddler, like terrorizing my office, throwing stuff on the ground. He wanted to play with me. And I had this train of thought running in my head, like, why is he doing this? This is so annoying. I had all these negative thoughts and these complaints, and I snapped myself out of it, because I took myself back to 3 years ago when my wife and I were struggling to conceive. And I prayed every single night that we would one day have a healthy child. And then here I was in the present complaining about that exact thing. And so it's a reminder too that sometimes you are literally living out your prayers. Sometimes the things you prayed for become the things that you complain about if you let them. And you have to snap yourself out of that. You have to learn to appreciate the present, to have gratitude for these things, because really you are living out your prayers in many ways.
I think once again, paraphrasing a quote, and it's either by Socrates or Epictetus, and said, remember the things that you have today were the things that you desired many years before. And it is so true that, you need to be consciously aware of these things. And this is where things like gratitude and journaling and, self-awareness comes so much into play in everyday life, because if you're not aware of those things, then you end up with this life filled with regret, or remember that time when that happened, and you get that feeling maybe in 10, 15 years, but you could have that feeling today. And it's a magical feeling. As much as things are gonna be their last time, a lot of the time when I'm having these thoughts now, I also remind myself of, there will be a last time, but it's not going to be today. It's a very nice kind of thought to have, knowing that you're still going to have a few of those times going forward.
Yeah. It's a reminder too that one of the biggest tragedies in life is spending all of your time looking in the rearview mirror, thinking about great days of yesteryear, thinking about all these memories of the past and how great life was and all of these things. It's what we all want to avoid. We want to be able to feel that way in the present, not feel like we just need to be sitting and reminiscing on the past. And sometimes I get together with people that I used to be close with, and I see in some of them that there's this living through your past still, making the same jokes, talking smack about the same people, saying the same things, all of this, trying to relive the glory days. And I'm much more focused on making today the glory days. I feel like that's a better pursuit.
Yeah, 100%. So in the book, you mention the energy calendar exercise. I was wondering whether you could talk us through what exactly that is and how we can implement it ourselves.
Yeah. So the energy calendar was an exercise that I put into use to try to get a better sense for the things in my day that were creating energy in my world. And the rationale there is that when you lean into things that are energy creating for you, you produce the best outcomes. Best things happen in life. When you spend time with people that create energy in your life, those are the best relationships. When you work on things that create energy, you create the best outputs. And so I want to spend more of my days on things that are creating energy and less of my days on things that are really draining, or the people that are really draining. So what I did was I took a day of my calendar. I had just gone through a Monday, and I color-coded every event from the day according to whether it created energy, I marked it green, or drained energy, I marked it red. And I did that for a week. At the end of a week, you have a very clear visual perspective on the types of activities and the people that created energy versus drained energy in your world. What that does is it gives you a sense for the changes you need to make, the slight adjustments or the bigger sweeping changes to make your calendar look more green than red. You're never going to get to a world where the entire calendar is green. It's just probably impossible, but you can work towards a world where the ratio of green to red is really high. And it doesn't need to be dramatic things, right? Like I did that exercise when I was still working in the finance world, where I couldn't go tell my boss, hey, I'm not doing these energy draining, calls anymore. Sorry. But I could move half of those calls to being a walking call and take it on the phone while out on a walk, which I find energy creating versus sitting at my desk, which is energy draining. So suddenly a whole bunch of the red on the calendar gets changed to green. And at the end of a week, if you do that, you feel dramatically different. You spent time on things that were lifting you up. You spent time with people that were lifting you up. You feel like a completely different human at the end of the week. And so it's an easy exercise that anyone can do. It's actually, I sort of listed out as the 1 week jump start to get started on this time well thing. Because anyone can do it. You go look at your calendar and develop that sense for what those trends are. What are the things? Who are the people that are creating that energy in your world? Because if you lean more into those, your life is going to improve.
It's like an energy Eisenhower matrix, really, isn't it? Which is awesome. I had a similar thing where I made a list of triggers and glimmers. And triggers, of course, are things that cause me to respond emotionally to certain things, and just being mindful of certain triggers. Are they triggers that are based out of insecurity and things that I'm not ignoring? Well, things that I'm ignoring in my life, or are they things that obviously needed addressing or removing? You know, if a person is triggering you because they're a toxic person, then of course that person needs to be reduced or removed out of your life. But if that person is triggering you because they're highlighting that you're not doing the things that they are, hence they're, you know, getting at it early in the morning, they're cold plunging when you're not, they're going to the gym when you're not, they're pushing themselves in self-development when you're not, that's a trigger which should highlight an insecurity that you need to change. And actually, rather than you know, kind of avoid it from your life, you've just exposed yourself to improve it. And with me, glimmers are this weird kind of feeling that you get when you're doing something that you enjoy doing. And it can be really simple things like on a Thursday, I leave my phone at home and I go to a spa with a notepad. And the spa has a certain smell to it, being a spa of all massage oils and that. And it just brings this feeling of just gratitude, and also that I'm in a very creative mindset now to start thinking of things which I don't normally think of. And there's a certain feeling that you get, which essentially I've called a glimmer. And I make notes of these things. Now, what's great about these glimmers are when I'm feeling triggered, the antidote to those triggers are then going, okay, cool. When was the last time I had this glimmer? And for me, the glimmers are, once again, getting out of the social media space, actually giving time to myself. Glimmers have been catching up with a certain individual where we discuss things. Glimmers could be simple as getting a train up to London and going for a walk around the art galleries, which once again is a massive thing for me, which I actually love, just walking around, just absorbing people, absorbing art, and just getting this kind of creative feeling which I can channel in. And that's really helped me, you know, kind of understand where my energies are at, exposing myself when I'm trying to ignore stuff, and of course reduce things in my life that are draining that energy.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at, what we're both saying too, is getting closer to and understanding your energy flows is more important than understanding your time. Time and energy are not the same. And that recognition is a really important one, because knowing your energy and starting to pay attention to how you feel during and after any activity, any meeting with someone, any time you spent with someone, that informs more than almost anything else in life. Your body does not lie to you. And learning to actually listen to your body, especially with people, by the way, I find this to be true 100% of the time. Your body tells you how you feel about somebody and whether you should spend more or less time with them. And if you listen to that, you will see a dramatic improvement in your life, because there are a lot of people that I tolerated for a long time who made me feel physically not well every time I spent time with them, because they put me down, they belittled me, they laughed at things I was doing, they told me to be realistic, or they were so showy about all the things they had that I didn't. They criticized my own self-improvement journey. And learning to listen to that and make adjustments to who you spend time with on the basis of how that person is physically making you feel will have a real, clear, direct improvement very, very quickly. But you have to learn to actually listen to it and lean into that thing.
Yeah, and I think as well, I feel this all the time, that it's not just listening to myself, it's actually listening to what that person is trying to project on me. Because I think a lot of the time when I speak, and just bring to mind certain individuals that are very materialistic focused, and they want to show me what they've bought, what they've done, what they're going to do. And before, I used to get kind of triggered by it, by going, you know, that's not what I value in life. But really deep down, I understood that they're just trying to get from me this feeling of that they're good enough. And actually deep down, that was many years ago what I was trying to do. I was trying to signal to people that, you know, like, I'm worthy of things. So, you know, that kind of flip turned to me of going, oh, okay, that's the way that person displays how they need to get things from others. And that really helped me deal with certain individuals, which, now I can deal with them so much better. I think it could potentially be an Abraham Lincoln quote. He said, "I dislike that man, I must get to know him better." And I love that, because that person who normally triggers you, that annoys you, sometimes a person that you can learn the most from. The things that you learn the most from those people are this solidification of your life, that you're happy with the way that you're living, and they're examples that you are happy with the choices that you've made in your life, in the way that you think and act.
My a perfect story of exactly that. So my wife and I went and spent time over a dinner with this couple friend of ours, and that couple friend is extraordinarily wealthy, multi-billionaire, like extraordinarily wealthy. And we left, and I was so concerned leaving that my wife was going to say, like, "Oh, we need to make more money," or "We need more," like, "Oh, this is so great. They're going on all these amazing trips. They're doing because they were telling us the whole dinner about something in the Bahamas and something in the Virgin Islands and something in Europe and something in Asia, like all of these glamorous things they were doing. Well, I barely got a word in edgewise. And we left, and my wife looked at me and just said, "I love our life." And it was exactly that. It was this recognition that, oh my God, they have so much more than us, so much more than I will ever have, so much more than I will ever aspire to have. But we have enough. And that enough is the most beautiful thing in the world. I mean, the other day, like, we took my son to the zoo for the first time, to the Bronx Zoo right by our house. And we were walking around and we saw the giraffes, and he was so excited. And we got back home and we were in bed that night. And my wife just said to me, "I loved our day today. Like, I love our little life." And that idea, like that little life, the way she said it too, it's so funny and so poignant, because there's so much about the world where we're told that you need to have the big life. You need to have the like fancy watches, the trips, the Instagram moments, like all the big life, right? But the beauties are the little life. The beauties are found in those little moments, the little like time at the zoo, the little thing with the family. There's so much beauty in that little life that is very easy to forget on the journey. The other thing that you said that sparked a thought with me is there are a lot of times when you sharing your growth journey with the world, and you growing and changing, is going to piss other people off. It's going to be a trigger for other people, because it's going to highlight and expose an insecurity in them. And the one thing I consistently say and remind myself is that you are not responsible for the way that your growth journey makes other people feel. You are not responsible. You need to remove that burden from you, because it's so easy to see the way that it's making other people feel, to hear their reactions, the triggers, them putting you down, them belittling you, them saying those things, and to think, oh, okay, I need to come back in. I need to tone it down. I need to pull myself back. I can't shine quite this bright. And that is the worst thing that you can do. It's the worst reaction you can have. If anything, you should see that and say, that's a sign that I'm doing something right, that my growth, that my journey, that my transformation is exposing these things in other people, these insecurities. And I think more people need to lean into that.
I think as well, it's a bit like a lot of people, they worry about saying no to individuals. And I say, well, no, you still say no. And actually what happens is you reveal whether, regardless, that is the right decision. Because if you say no and the person goes, okay, cool, you're busy, I respect that no, then actually that was the right no to say, because now not only have you said no that you can focus on something else, but once again, you're going to say no a lot more because that person respects those boundaries. However, if once again you say the same thing no, and that person gets annoyed the fact that you said no and they want some of your time, you've just revealed why that was the right reason to say no, because now that is probably going to be a permanent no to that individual. So you haven't changed your decision or your word. And what it's actually done is it's revealed everything that you need to know about why you said that. And I think that's the same with your growth journey. Is if somebody is celebrating your success and your growth and that, then you're going to spend more time because they are energy creating human beings. However, if that person is getting triggered by your growth, once again, it's a great thing to do because you've realized that the relationship has, it has come to an end. But you don't change the way that you act in what it is that you do. And I absolutely love that.
Very true.
So moving on to social wealth now, Sahil, and of course, what you've put in the book is the connection to others in your personal and professional worlds, the depth and breadth of connection of those around you. This, of course, leads me to this kind of this depth that you have with people, and it gets me thinking about loneliness. I think it's got a lot worse in the last kind of 4 or 5 years. And it caused me to look at some statistics in the UK on loneliness. And it said in 2022, 49.6% of adults in the UK reported feeling lonely occasionally, sometimes, often, or always. And that loneliness can increase the risk of early mortality by 26%. Why do you think loneliness is such a big issue in such a hyper-connected world?
I call it the paradox of connectedness, which is that we are more connected to the world than ever before via our phones, via social media, but we're less connected to the people in front of us. And social media has done this wonderful, magnificent thing of making it easier than ever to connect with people all around the world, but harder than ever to connect with the person sitting right in front of us. How many times have you walked down a crowded street and not seen a single person because you were looking down at your phone? Even today, right? I do it all the time, by the way. I'm not holier than thou on this. We all do it. Our posture has changed. We are like this all day rather than sitting up, looking people in the eye. You're actually considered weird if you smile at people on the street. People look at you. I mean, in New York City, you might get into a fight if you look at someone and smile. I saw this thing recently that was like, when you get on a train and you don't want someone to sit next to you, so you put your bag on the chair. Someone was saying that's actually a bad strategy. What you should do is rub the seat and smile at people as they walk by, because then no one will sit there because everyone will think you're batshit crazy. But it's very, very it's very true that it has gotten worse. Although, to be honest, this is a trend if you look at the data that has been happening for the last 2 decades plus. I saw a statistic recently that teenagers in the United States are spending 70% less time with their friends in person than they were 2 decades ago. 70%. I mean, a dramatic reduction. And you think about what that does to your life. The lack of texture that comes with that human, real, face-to-face interaction. The relationship. How can you build a deep relationship with someone without that texture, without the touch, without the feeling of sitting in the mud with someone, really, really being there with them? And it's terrifying. And we know, by the way, the science is abundant on this at this point. The Harvard study of adult development tracked the lives of 1,300 plus people over the course of 80 plus years. And they found that the single greatest predictor of your physical health at age 80 was relationship satisfaction at age 50. Not your cholesterol, not your blood pressure, not any of those other things, not whether you drank and smoked. Literally, how you felt about your relationships had the single greatest impact on how your physical health was in your later years. So we know this is what matters. Relationships. That is literally what matters. When you go ask any 90, 100, 80-year-old what was most important in their life, what do they regret, what would they tell their younger self? This is the answer. This is the number one answer that you hear from everyone. It's prioritize the relationships. When you ask young people to envision their ideal life at age 80, which I did to hundreds of people as part of this book, every single one of them says some version of being surrounded by love. And yet, when you look at people's actions today, they're spitting on that. They're not taking the actions. And by the way, we know what the actions are. It's funny, actually, like with all of these things in the book, with all of these different topics, if you invert the problem, so say with marriage, with a romantic relationship, I know how to screw up a marriage. You may not know how to build a perfect marriage, but I know how to screw one up. avoid hard conversations, show contempt, complain about things all the time, don't voice appreciation. Those things will ruin a marriage. I guarantee it. So do the opposite. It's the same thing with health. Like, I know how to end up obese. Don't move, eat crappy foods, don't sleep enough. Like, do the opposite of those, and your life will probably look pretty good. And so for relationships, we know what is going to mean lack of relationships in your life. Don't go out. Don't talk to people. Don't sit in the mud with people. Avoid hard conversations. All of those things are going to lead to a life where you lack the depth. You lack that feeling of true connection. And by the way, like, I think loneliness is often defined as not having anyone that you can call for help. Like, not having that person that you can call in the middle of the night if something goes wrong in your life. That's real loneliness, that feeling that there's no one. You can avoid that by being there for someone else, by being that to somebody else. If you put that out into the world, the things that you put out energy-wise, you will receive in return. I truly believe that. That's like an ancient Indian principle, karma. It exists in a lot of ancient religious traditions. It's true. The things you put out into the world, you receive in return. So if you want to find someone to be there for you, be there for someone else.
I always say it's finding your foul weather friends. You've got your fair weather friends who are only there when times are good, and those foul weather friends are times, no matter where the storm is coming, they're always there. And I think that's such an important thing, to find that small group of people who are your kind of foul weather friends. And as you said there, it's also asking yourself, who am I a foul weather friend to? And I'm always thinking about this, of just having this kind of experiment of, okay, I'm busy at the moment, but if that person called me and needed my help, would I drop everything to make sure that they have? And, I've done it. I actually did it this week, actually, with somebody who was needed me at a place somewhere in London, even though I wasn't due to come here. That was busy that day, but because they are a foul weather friend, it's just, you get this kind of gut feeling that, they're not telling me that they need this, but they're kind of asking, very subtly for it, and you can feel that energy from them. They're like, I got you. It's all good. And
I've seen this. I saw this thing recently that you have 3 types of friends. There are leaves, branches, and roots. Leaves are here during the warm, nice months, and as soon as the storm comes or the winter comes, they're gone. The branches are a little stronger, but you have to be careful, because if you put too much weight on them, if you rely on them too much, they might break. But the roots are the people that are there for you through all seasons. They're deep. They're connected, they're grounded, and they'll be with you throughout the seasons of your life. And so the whole idea is to find those roots in your life and to be the roots for somebody else.
I love that. Before I forget, something I was obviously reading through the book last night, whilst also keeping my son happy by educating him on, because of course it's December now, on the classic films of Christmas, and the film which he hadn't seen yet was Home Alone.
Oh, the best.
And actually I was thinking about this book, and I was also, I said to my wife, I said, do you know what's funny is if this film came out now, the film wouldn't exist, because they would have left him at home, they would have FaceTimed him and found that him to be perfectly fine. And that's kind of interesting, because the whole story was about having a dispute with a family, having a separation, and then realizing the mistakes that they had made from, of course, being in the present moment, so close with a family and actually hating each other, that it took being away for a long period of time and everything happening for them to actually cherish and actually understand their relationship. And actually, when you think fast forward, it's like, to be honest, if this was a 2024, 2025 version of Home Alone, they probably would have stayed in Paris. They probably have checked that he was okay and not had that whole story and narrative and connection with those, with those individuals. I know it's very deep thought to think of Home Alone, but it's so true when when you're talking about that hyper connectedness and just not being able to actually get that feeling of missing somebody. And I think that is what is missing in this life of going, okay, just because you FaceTime someone or just because you spoke to them online doesn't mean that you've actually connected with those individuals.
There's a macro point there on the Home Alone thing that's important too, which is friction and adventure go hand in hand. And we live in a world where the trend line has been reducing or removing friction from all areas of our life. And the question is, in doing so, have we also removed a lot of the things that created meaning, the things that created memories? I think about this and reflect on this a lot, about my parents' lives, my grandmother's life. My grandmother passed away last year, unfortunately, and she grew up in India. She was born a princess in India, was then run out of their land by the British colonists. And she had so many unbelievable stories and adventures in her childhood. The stories she would tell me, they would never happen to a young person today because you were constantly connected, because you are every single thing is planned out and to perfection. You don't have to go up to a girl at a bar and experience the threat of rejection or the fear of being rejected because you already opted in on whatever app. You don't have to, go out with your friends and just hope you can find your way to scrounge up the money for a movie because your parents bought the ticket on the app and you already have it on your phone and you're taking an Uber to get to the exact right place. Every single ounce of friction that created all of these memories, these experiences, these adventures has been sucked out of the system. And so you wonder, what is the impact of that on an entire generation of frictionless humans, of people who have not experienced those things that created texture? Because we all know, what are the vacations that you remember most from your life? It's not the ones that went perfectly according to plan. It's the time when your bags got lost and you ended up having to buy clothes out of the airport bookstore and you somehow had an incredible experience. It's the time when, they didn't have your reservation and you had to wander around and find the right place. It was when things went wrong, things didn't go according to plan, that the best memories were created. And so to live in a world where we've sucked that out of the system, where that effectively doesn't need to happen, you just wonder whether some of the meaning has been sucked out along the way.
Yeah, 100%. And, going back to that Home Alone thing, that would have just been a bad day rather than an entire film about the journey. And I think the reason that you're able to share those stories decades later is not because that you can go back on your camera roll and show a person, because it's stuck in your mind, permanently. And I always think about that when it comes to, what I want to do with adventures and stories and the things that I need to make more difficult in my life to have those things. And I think as well, people just underestimate how powerful making things more difficult actually is.
Yeah, you and I talk about this all the time. Obviously, we do our morning cold plunges, and I feel like that has became sort of a meme on the internet because it became a trend that everyone did to get likes and to get clicks. I think most of the people that were doing it to get likes and clicks no longer do it because it's no longer like a arbitrage on social media. You're not getting, some big credit for it in the way. So the people that are still doing it are like just real ones that actually found the value in it. And the value that I experience from doing things like that has nothing to do with any sort of physical benefit. People are like, oh, well, what about the brown fat or the dopamine or the, metabolism, like any of those things? Like, I have no idea if any of that's true. I have zero data or science to back it up, in my opinion. But what I know is how it makes me feel, which is that I start my day and I feel like a badass. I feel like a savage. I feel like a winner. And that has ripple effects into every other area of my life. It has nothing to do with the cold plunge. It just has to do with how it makes me feel and how that feeling carries into every single other thing that I do during the course of my day. And that holds immense power. Being able to create a feeling reliably that I know has ripple effects, sign me up. I mean, that's like a magic pill at that point. It just happens to be very painful and very hard.
Yeah. It's an example. When I do a Q&A every Saturday, and actually, it was an interesting question. Somebody said to me, do you still go to the gym?
because you never post about it. And my response was, yeah, I've been going to the gym for 26 years. However, the start of my career was documenting my entire fitness journey. And now it's no longer about that, but it's still my thing. And actually, one of the things that I love about it now is that I don't need to, or do it, don't need to show my entire journey. It's now my thing. And it's very much like the cold plunges. I didn't show I used to obviously show a lot of cold plunges, and then somebody asked me, do you still do the cold plunges? And I said, yes, but I don't video all of them, and actually, speaking of which, November was a weird time because normally I'm very consistent with cold plunges, and I was going from doing it daily to just twice a week, and I could just feel the rationalization in my head. And I was like, in order for me to get back into this, I've got to make a bigger commitment to it. So December is the 31 days of cold. And it's amazing how that has channeled this thought process of, getting back to making that commitment to myself with it. Because I think day 9, and I've wanted to do it, probably the first day was the only day that I wanted to do it. But I'm so glad that I'm doing it now, and I'm getting back into this mindset of going, it's not a luxury thing like exercise, cold plunges. It's an essential thing. It's a non-negotiable that I need to set myself to do. And what I found with the cold plunge was I was allocating 45 minutes to do something that takes 2, because I needed 43 minutes to think about doing it and then 3 minutes to do. And now, of course, it's because I've got a limited amount of time in the morning, it's taking just 5 minutes to do. And it's like, yes, that is the time when you don't think and you create that essential thing. So I'm glad that I've kind of recommitted to the cold plunge, because it is also a reminder of how impactful it is in my life too.
Yeah. I mean, the human mind is a pretty remarkable thing, in both a good way and a bad way. I mean, I find I've probably done at this point thousands of morning cold plunges. And every single morning, this is not an exaggeration, every single morning I wake up, I go to the bathroom, and I sit there, and I have this thought that goes through my head, like, I don't really need to do it today. I could just go to my desk right now. I would get more work done because I could start earlier. I wouldn't have to do the cold plunge, and then, I wouldn't have to move around. Like, I could just get going. I start doing this like every single morning. It's crazy to me. I'm like, man, after this long, like, you'd think I would just be like, okay, this is what I do next. But every single morning I have to re-engage with the discipline muscle to remind myself that the thing I need is more important than the thing I want. And if you can learn that, like if you can learn to allow the thing you need to override the thing you want in whatever it is in life, there's a lot that comes from it. But it's never easy. And when I say, like, I post constantly saying rent is due. And that idea is central to everything that I'm about, because every single morning you have to pay your dues, whatever it is. There's never a point where you sort of make it and then everything becomes easy. It's the same for making money in business, by the way. Like, people think, oh, once you make it, then you can kind of coast. Once you make it to this level, then you can coast. If Apple stops making new iPhones, they will not be a successful company in 2 years. They're one of the biggest companies in the entire world. If they stop making new phones, they will no longer be successful. They, just like you, have to pay your dues every single day. There's this story that I paraphrase in the book, that every morning in the savannah, a gazelle wakes up and knows that it needs to outrun the lion or get eaten. And the lion wakes up and knows it has to outrun the gazelle or starve. And the whole point is that whether you're the gazelle or the lion, every single morning when you wake up, you better start running. It's the same for our lives. Unfortunately or fortunately, there's no such thing as making it. You're not going to one day wake up and just be able to coast and have all of these things come to you with ease. You have to earn your keep every single day. And it gets harder because you have more to lose. You have more responsibilities, more mouths to feed, more expectations, more pressure that you put on yourself. But the rewards are infinite if you can do it.
Yeah, 100%. Something that I've been talking a lot to people about, because I think one of the questions that I had from somebody is it always going to be this difficult to do these things? And I'm like, it is, but it's going to feel different. And the analogy that I kind of gave with that is getting in orbit versus being in orbit. And to get in orbit, and we're talking about, a rocket needs to burn 10,000 liters of fuel a second to get up into orbit. But when it's in orbit, it needs 0 liters of fuel because it's very easy to float about in orbit. And it's the way that I talk about doing difficult things, making a commitment, and then starting to see the benefit from doing it is once you're in orbit, it's a lot easier to float around and do it. But if you rest on your laurels with that, if you don't steer the ship correctly, it's very easy also to fall back out of orbit. And that's the hardest thing. It's like falling off the wagon and then suddenly now needing to burn all of that fuel to get back up. It's easier to, for me, I always say to people when it comes to the gym, they're like, oh, how often do you train? I'm like, as long as I get a couple of good sessions in each week, that's enough to stay in orbit. And they're like, orbit. And I said that maintenance of muscle is so much easier than building muscle. It took me decades to get what I've got now. And it's so much easier to do. And it's the same with the cold plunge. What happened with the cold plunge is I fell out of orbit. And then I started to burn a lot more fuel in my head to try and get back into it. It's just like, right, you need to go through this stage now of getting back into that orbit. And that comes down to making that commitment. But once you're there, staying there is just so much easier.
The cool thing is also that you get the noob gains. And that's not just physical, right? Like in physical wealth, when you first start training, you experience the early gains. And so if you can endure the pain of 30 days, if you're brand new, you will see and feel a change 100%. And you and me at this point, training in your life, you could train hard for 30 days and not look at you look the exact same, and that's really frustrating. So enjoy that early period and actually use that as a momentum creator because that applies to every area. Like if you focus on things in your relationships and your time and your, in your business and your financial world, like if you're new, you will experience real benefits in 30 days if you stick to it.
So moving on to mental wealth, Sahil, and obviously what you've said in the book is the connection to a higher order purpose and meaning that provides motivation and guides your short and long-term decision making. How do we create a higher order purpose? What is this higher order purpose in your life?
It's very different for every single person. And the important point that I really want people to internalize is that your purpose does not have to be your job. We've been sold this lie that you have to find some incredible purpose in your work and in the things that you do. If you can and you do, great. But if you don't, that's totally fine too. Your purpose can be something completely different. What you do need to do is make sure that you connect to your purpose during your work. What I mean by that is, let's take the example of someone that's working at a factory, on an assembly line, putting together widgets. They might not feel any purpose in that job, punching the clock 9 to 5, putting together widgets every single day, day in, day out. But if their higher order purpose is to be a provider for their family, that they're going to be the type of father that they didn't have, you can connect to that while you're at your job. You can go to your job saying, this job isn't my purpose. I don't care about these damn widgets that I'm making, but I care about the fact that it is allowing me to live out that higher order purpose that I have, that thing that I've defined for myself, that I am a provider, that I'm the person that I didn't have in my life, that I'm going to be that father to my children. And that provides so much more energy to the thing you're doing on a daily basis because you know that it's serving something higher. It's serving something bigger at that level. The journey to find that will take different amounts of time for different people. But that journey that's the hero's journey. That is the journey that we are all on in some form or function in our life. The journey to explore our curiosities, to uncover what that purpose is. And that purpose is also going to be season dependent because your purpose when your children are 2, 5, 10 is going to feel very different than when you're an empty nester or if you're a retiree or if you're just starting out in your career. My purpose when I was 22 was to build a rock solid foundation for the rest of my life. And that foundation came in the form of money. That foundation came in the form of networks, and that foundation came in the form of knowledge. That was my purpose. Every single day, I wanted to make decisions, short and long term, that were going to build those three things in the foundation. So it was people, it was the network, it was money, it was the financial, actually putting money away, and it was knowledge. I wanted to get smarter. I wanted to learn things. I wanted to build that block of wisdom that I could compound in the future. That was my purpose. And my work was a piece of that. I didn't have to like my job every single day for it to serve that purpose. It did. I was meeting tons of great people. I was learning a lot. I was making money. I could hate my job every single day, but it was clearly serving that purpose. And so I think that gets lost a lot with, especially the younger generation, is this feeling of like, oh, you need to love your job. You need to find all this fulfillment in your job. Sometimes a job is just a job. Sometimes a job sucks. Sometimes you hate a job. That doesn't mean that you can't get incredible value from it. That doesn't mean that it can't serve your higher order purpose, what you're trying to do. That doesn't mean that it doesn't provide useful insights that'll allow you to vault forward in whatever your next thing is. So leaning into the current season, leaning into that idea of what am I learning? What am I growing? Like, how can I be smarter in the next season of my life through the thing that I'm doing now, even if I don't like it? Even if you hate a job, there's some insight there of something that you do like about it. Or all of the things you hate, okay, those are good things to avoid in what the next thing is. But there is a positive insight that you can glean from it if you lean into that.
It reminds me of Dr. Maxwell Maltz in his book Psycho-Cybernetics. He speaks about, funny enough, he said people are like bikes. He said when they are stationary, they're really hard to steer. And when they're moving, they're very, very easy to steer. And this purpose is essentially momentum. You know, a bike is easy to steer. It doesn't always necessarily mean that you're going in the right direction, but you're getting momentum in your life. And I think as soon as you lose that momentum, that's where mentally it affects me. I need to have goals. I need to have purpose. I need to know that, you know, not necessarily going in the right direction, but I'm just kind of, you know, I'm in the right area and I just need to keep moving to figure it out. And I think that's what I find with a lot of people is actually you can push a lot harder when you know that you're moving towards the right things in your life.
And you cannot answer the big questions for your life standing still. You cannot stand here today and say what your purpose is and what the future looks like and what your actions are going to be and all of these things. The answer is found in the action. Rumi, the ancient poet, said, as you start to walk the way appears. As you start to walk the way appears. The answer is found in the action. You can't plan out your life from where you stand. You have to start walking, and then the answers reveal themselves. I've always thought of it as there are all these invisible opportunities floating out in front of you. Invisible, literally. You have no idea that they're there. They're nonlinear, they're asymmetric. The most interesting opportunities in life are invisible. And you reveal them through action. You reveal them through the work. And suddenly they seem obvious and they're blindingly in front of you and you walk down that path and you say, oh, I can't believe that I didn't know that this existed. That was the story of my own life. I was working on this very traditional track. I had no plan to go and write. People ask me now, what's your plan for 5 years from now? I have no idea. Because 5 years ago, if you had asked me to write 100 scenarios for where I would be today, I could have written 100 scenarios out and not a single one of them would have been correct. Because the most interesting opportunity was completely invisible to me. But I started taking action. I started doing something, and suddenly the invisible became visible. And I was able to go walk down that path. As you start to walk the way appears.
I'm excited because we're going to be moving on to physical wealth now, something that both you and I hold really, really high in our lives. And I was thinking about a lot of questions to ask you with this, but I think the one that I really want to go with is an annual Musogi challenge. One of the things that has been a massive impact in my life is doing incredibly difficult things, which I'm not sure if I'm actually capable of achieving. And when people ask me why I do these things, my response is normally perspective. Because if I can push myself to do things which I doubted that I can do and achieve them, I'll have that in my life forever. So whenever I'm approaching a physical thing in my life, I can remind myself of all the things that I've done and achieved. And that makes the things that I'm pursuing much easier. And I suppose it's the same with business and you know, with your mental wealth and with your social wealth as well, putting yourself out there, speaking to strangers. But I know that you have done kind of Musogi challenges before, so I'm interested to hear how that positions in your life going forward, if at all, and what it has done for your life, actually doing those things which you're not quite sure whether you're actually able to achieve.
Yeah. So the Musogi challenge is this ancient Japanese purifying ritual. And the original one is they would climb this mountain and go and stand under this frozen waterfall. And the idea is to do something so hard on one day out of the year that it makes all the rest of the year feel much, much easier. I started doing some form of this back in like 2012 when myself and this one crazy dear friend of mine decided that if we were going to extend our playing careers in baseball, we were going to have to become much mentally tougher than we were at the time, and that it wasn't going to be physical because our bodies were kind of breaking down, and so it was just going to be mental. And so that winter we went out in a pair of like boxer shorts in like 0 degree weather. I mean, it was, I guess, Celsius, probably like -20 or something like that. And bear crawled up this mountain near my house through the snow and came back with like probably low degree frostbite and a whole bunch of things, but hardened in a big way. And none of it was productive. It did not help us in baseball in any way, but both of us still talk about how it instilled in us this idea that we were tough to kill. And not literally, but like it was very hard to knock us out of the fight. And there was a camaraderie that was built through it, a relationship that was forged through the crawling of that I imagine you experienced in the military as well, that is impossible to break. I cannot see this friend of mine, Chad, for years and years and will still immediately hit it right back off. I know he would be there for me. I love the concept of the Musogi challenge and finding ways on an annual basis or on a recurring basis to lean into these things that are very physically and mentally demanding is something that I will continue to do for sure. The next one that I'm currently contemplating is trying to run a sub 3-hour marathon around a track. So I've run 2 sub 3-hour marathons. I trained for them extensively though. I haven't been training, and I certainly haven't done it around a track, which is mentally just like debilitating to think about 100+ laps around a single track over and over and over again. And the idea with the Musogi challenge is that it should be 50-50 whether you actually are able to complete it. Like it really should be that difficult. And that feels to me like a difficult enough pursuit that I think there's a decent chance I can't do it. I'll finish it, but in under 3 hours, I'm not so sure. I might come in 3:15 or something like that. But that's the next one that's on my mind. And I know it's a good one because I'm like terrified at the idea of committing to doing it. Even as I'm sitting here, I'm like, I don't really need to do that. And whenever I start having that, it's the same as a cold plunge. Whenever I start having the like, that seems stupid, I could just do something else, I could do whatever, I know that like, this has to be the thing that I lean into.
Yeah, all of my charity events that I've done, endurance ones, have come from that kind of, that would be stupid to tell people that you're doing. So that's the first thing that I do.
It's a good test.
And yeah, it does suck. One of them was running backwards for 24 hours around an 800 meter track.
Oh, so you were like the OG of these like crazy online fitness and health challenges.
Yeah, I mean 109 kilometers it was on a 800 meter track.
Running backwards.
Yeah.
That is bonkers, man.
It is.
Do you have a video of it?
Yeah.
Oh, I got to look this up. This is bonkers.
Yeah. It was,
how long did it take?
It was 24 hours.
24 hours. Okay.
So yeah, it was 24 hours and it was going for a world record. So it was the furthest distance in 24 hours running backwards.
Okay. And you got it?
No.
Oh, you missed it.
Somebody crazier than me.
That had done more or beat you after?
Who had done a further distance within.
How much further?
Yeah, I think the record I went for was 100, I think it was 100 kilometers as fast as possible. And I missed it by 8 minutes.
Huh.
But for me, it was, a lot of these challenges, they're not necessarily, they are, of course, physical kind of Musogi challenges, but they're also for a purpose. And the purpose is to raise as much money for my local children's charity. So as much as I didn't get the world record, we did raise £29,000 for the local children's hospice. So
amazing.
It ticks both boxes. It's allows me to tap into my craziness of doing difficult things, but also for for the purpose of raising money for others, which is, I've pushed myself in lots of different things such as that over the years. And next year's my 40th, and I'm celebrating by doing a 12-hour Tough Mudder.
There you go. Celebrating. A weird masochistic celebration. But no, I mean, the real insight here is that physical wealth, fitness, is a catalyst for everything else in life. I always say this, that there's no such thing as a loser who wakes up at 5 a.m. and works out. And the reason I say that has nothing to do with waking up early. It has nothing to do with working out. It has nothing to do with any of that stuff. All it has to do is that is the quickest way to remind yourself, to rewire your brain that you are a winner. And you're doing something hard to start every single day. And if you are not happy with your place in life, if you are feeling lost, if you're feeling stuck, for 30 days, wake up at 5 a.m. and go work out. I guarantee at the end of that 30 days, you will feel completely different about yourself, because you'll know that you're the type of person that can take on something really challenging and go out and do it. And that has ripple effects into every single other thing in life, whether it's work, business, relationships, whatever, because you're the type of person who can do that hard thing every single day. That's not to say that you can't be successful sleeping later and not working out. By all means, you can do that. But if you want to change your life and you're not happy with where you are, that's the fastest way I know to do it.
And it kind of brings us into financial wealth with something that Jim Rohn said. He said, everyone should aspire to become a millionaire, not for the £1 million, but for the kind of person that you need to become to get there. And I think you can replace that million with everyone should aspire to be as fit as they possibly can. Everyone should aspire to be as family and friends orientated as possible, because it's these habits and routines that once you achieve that, you start to understand. And it kind of reminds me, a lot of people want to have the body, they want to have, the six pack and the physique. And I say to people all the time, don't wish to have these things overnight, because if I gave you the body of your dreams tomorrow, it wouldn't last long for two reasons. One, you didn't know how you got it. And number two, you didn't know how to maintain it. So don't wish to learn and have these things without the friction and the hard work that it takes to get them. And that includes anything.
Yeah, that was the value. The value was in that. It's in the becoming, not in the having. If you were to get dropped at the top of Mount Everest right now, you would pass out, because you hadn't acclimatized. You hadn't actually acclimated to the altitude on the way up. So it's not reaching the summit of Mount Everest. It's climbing Mount Everest and actually getting to the summit. That is the thing. It's the same for all of these areas. It's the reason, by the way, that so many lottery winners go bankrupt, because they did not have to acclimatize to having that level of wealth. That happens on the journey. It happens in the work that you had to put in to get to that, because you understand the meaning of it when you get there. I think about that all the time. I also just think about the fact that a lot of people complain that they don't know what to build in their life. They don't know what to do. They don't know the purpose. If you don't know what to build yourself. Build your body so that you are tough to kill. Build your mind so that you're resilient. Build your spirit so that you have grit. If you do that, then you can build anything. It doesn't matter at that point. And on financial wealth, the single principle that I think people need to understand if they want to build financial wealth, or frankly, any of these types of wealth, is you get what you create in the world. Create value, receive value. Every single person who has achieved extraordinary financial wealth has created an enormous amount of value for others. And they've captured a small portion of that, which has made them very wealthy. There's no way of getting around that. No one hands you money in the world. No one's going to hand you any of these things. You have to go out and create value. And if people don't know what that means, there's all sorts of people around you. There's customers, there's stakeholders, there's employees, there's colleagues, there's your boss, whatever. They all have problems. Figure out what those problems are, solve the problem, and then go scale that solution. That's basically how you make money. If you can just do that over and over again, you can make a lot of money. but you have to create value. Money does not just come at poof out of thin air. And that's something that a lot of young people are losing sight of today. Every young person I talk to now thinks they should be a millionaire, thinks they should make $1 million by age 30 because they've seen it on social media. All these people telling them, oh, it's easy. Look, I'm at a private jet. I work 3 hours a week on the beach. That's not how the world works. A couple people may be able to pull that off. That's not reality. The reality is that you have to create an enormous amount of value for a lot of people to make that kind of money.
I think one story that pretty much summarizes financial wealth is something that you've put in the book, and it's that story of the fisherman and the investment banker. Just wondering if you can share the story, because it's one of my favorites.
So this investment banker takes a vacation to this Mexican fishing village. He's walking along the docks one afternoon and he sees this broken down fishing boat and a fisherman in the boat who's caught some fish, and he's cleaning them. And he says, how long did it take you to catch those fish? And the fisherman looks up and smiles and just says, only a little while. And the banker's a little puzzled. It's like, well, why didn't you fish for longer? And the fisherman says, well, I have enough. I fish as much as I need to. And then I take a siesta, I go take a nap, then I go into town and I drink wine with my wife, play music with my friends, and we laugh and have a great time. And the banker says, oh, you've got this all wrong. Here's what you do. You need to fish for longer so that you can catch more fish. Then you use the profits from that to get another boat. Then that's going to make you more money. And then you get another boat and another boat. And you build a huge fishing enterprise. You move to the big city. You're going to take your company public and you're going to make millions. And the fisherman looks at him and says, and then what? And the banker says, well, then you can fish a little just when you want to. You can take a siesta. You can take a nap in the afternoon and then go have dinner with your wife, drink wine, play music, and laugh with your friends. And the fisherman looks at him, smiles, and walks off into the afternoon sun. And the point of the story is you have to define what your wealthy, successful life looks like. The fisherman was already living his version of a successful life, which did not align with the definition that the banker had. It's actually not about the banker being wrong and the fisherman being right, which is the common understanding of that story. It's about defining what success looks like to you, the values that you hold dear, and then building your life around those.
I think pretty much summarizes everything that you're talking about in the book, 5 Types of Wealth. I want to finish with something a little bit different on this one, Sahil, and it is a quick fire round.
Ooh.
Now, I've made this super difficult because they are very thought-provoking questions, which I need a pretty rapid fire answer.
Okay.
One, because we have 4 minutes left, which is great. And 2, they're a deep ponder as well. So let's get ready to rumble. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Something you've changed your mind on since we last spoke?
That I always give it my all. I've come to realize that I often self-sabotage in that I fail to give 100% because I'm afraid of what would happen if I did give 100% and still failed. And that recognition has been a painful one to recognize.
I feel that down to my core. If you could define enough in one sentence, what would it be?
My wife and son at home for dinner.
What's the biggest trade-off you've made in life, and was it worth it?
Deciding to step off the extremely lucrative track working in finance to build my own way. And it was the best decision I've ever made.
What's the most unexpected lesson you've learned from a totally random person?
That's a great question. I think it was that old man on the street that said that to me. And it wasn't that the lesson was so crazy or new. It was the timing of when it hit. Sometimes it's the recognition that it's not just the insight, it's when. It's like sometimes the right words at the right time have the power to completely change you. And when he said, I remember standing here with my newborn, she's 45 now. I was standing there in that moment with my newborn. The idea that it can just go in the flash of an eye just hit at the right time.
If you could invent a holiday, what would it celebrate and how would people observe it?
Probably like a day of friction and it would be no phones, zero connectivity, and you have to do something physically or mentally challenging.
What would you call the day?
The Masogi day. I don't know. Yes, I think the day of Masogi.
Final question. If you could pass on only one idea to your son, what would it be?
You can achieve anything that you want to, as long as you're willing to put in the work.
Sahil, thank you ever so much for round 3 on the Mindset with Muscle podcast. Just want to take this time to tell you how much I appreciate you as an individual. You inspire me. You make me challenge things that I'm doing in my life, and that has made me over the years with our conversations really beat on my craft of being a person that exposes themselves often to challenging things and is on a constant pursuit to not only be my best self, but my best self for other people too. So I just want to say a massive appreciation and thank you for that.
I feel the exact same way. I wish we lived closer together so we could do some cold water collectives or something like that on Sundays.
Yeah, 100%. So I finish every podcast with the same quote, Sahil, and it's what you put in your body affects how you look and how you feel, and what you put in your head affects what you think and what you do. And today you've been filling your heads with me, Alderton, and Sahil Bloom. Sahil, thank you ever so much for coming on the Mindset Muscle podcast.